Biff what to do. If we could replace Biff with a robot, with a pointing robot, or perhaps a laser, we could totally get rid of the role of floor director. Like, if we could just put a laser on all 3 cameras, Loretta would just push a button, and the laser would be like, go to camera 2, okay? And that, I would have no floor director anymore. Which would be good, because my floor director is the guy that's like, you know, you're not editing your shows fast enough. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I've been busy. You know, I was buying 2 houses, and there were all those orphans that needed to be rescued. And there was this product which we shipped, maybe you heard of it, called Lion. I mean, I know you work in the iPod group. You're not used to shipping products on a timely schedule. But over in software engineering, we've got to make some money. No, we don't care. No, it's all iPhones and iPads now, near as I can tell. So apparently I have to go edit more TV shows so that he will get off my back. And then I have to upload them to Blip TV so that you can enjoy them at home. Or in prison, wherever you are. I don't know where people watch this. But I think I've got to assume I'm big in prisons. Although I don't think they get the internet in prisons. Because if they did, prisoners would use it for... Yeah, no one in prison is watching them, apparently. I mean, I guess if you're in prison and you're watching this, it's probably on an iPod that was smuggled in. In which case, A, John is partly responsible, and B, you got to talk to the guy that smuggles crap in and tell him you want more porn and less Keith. Because Anyway, it's August of 2011. August, as everyone knows, is vacation time for everyone. You know, kids in school, they got the summer vacation. And if you have kids and you're a parent, then you have to take vacation with your kids because the state frowns on it if you take vacation without your kids and just leave them at home. Even if you put plenty of Frosted Flakes around. Like, when I was 8, if my parents had said, Keith, we're going on a cruise for a week, we bought 7 boxes of Frosted Flakes, and there are 3 gallons of milk in the refrigerator. Do you think you'll be alive 6 days from now when we get back? I would have been the happiest child in the world, and I would have, in fact, been alive 6 days later. Now, there would be no Frosted Flakes left in the house, because I would have eaten them all, because I, as a child, loved Frosted Flakes, and I still do love Frosted Flakes, but I'm not allowed to eat them anymore because they make me fat. But really, if you're a parent and you do this, they frown on that. They frown on that, the authorities do. So, like I was saying, if you're a parent, you also have to take your vacation during the summer, because that's the only time the kids don't have to go to school. And I guess if you're a parent and you could take a vacation like 5 hours at a time during the school year, right? You send the kids off, then you got 5 hours of vacation on Monday, then the kids come home. And you get 5... It would never work. Until we invent teleporters, you can't do that. So, anyway, so I, as you know, don't have children because of a court order. And so technically, I can vacation anytime I want. Nonetheless, it turns out I usually end up going on vacations in the summers. And case in point, this past week, I spent in Vancouver. And Vancouver is in British Columbia. And for you Americans out there, British Columbia is in a country called Canada. It's up near Alaska. And for you Americans out there, Alaska is a state in America. And it's, if you think of what you remember as the map of the United States, Alaska is that one that's always in the box up on the left side. And then you're like, oh, that's nice, Alaska. But there's no indication that like where that it's similarly, it's up and to the left of the rest of the North America part of the United States of America. And it's kind of turns, I don't want to get into a discussion of Alaska. We went to British Columbia, which is connected to Alaska. And then British Columbia is also connected to the rest of America. So it's kind of like if you were going to drive to Alaska, British Columbia would be that place where they asked you to get out your passport and then you'd be angry. because you're an American and you shouldn't need to have a passport to go to Alaska. But since you got to go through Canada, you need one. Anyway, I flew to Vancouver, although we stopped in Seattle. And then we got to Seattle, and then they're like, now we're going to British Columbia. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, British Columbia's in Canada. And I'm like, I know. They're like, you have to fill out this form. And I'm like, okay. And then I filled out this form, and then we flew into Canada, and we arrived. And first of all, Canada, at least the airport, is clean. And well maintained. Like, the carpet is not ratty and dirty. I don't know if that's true of all of Canada, but the airport was very nice. We landed after, 5.5 hours of travel, because I'm not good at booking plane flights. So, for example, on my trip to British Columbia, where I left here and arrived in British Columbia, I was going as part of a conference. Someone else left here after I did. And then while I was sitting at the gate in Seattle, they ran past and got on their plane, which was leaving before my plane was. So they got to Canada before I did, even though I left America before they did. It was very annoying. Although it gave me a lovely chance to see a lot of the inside of the airport in Seattle, which looked exactly like the inside of every other airport in America, except more fish. A lot of fish logos and everything. Anyway, as I was saying, so I get to British Columbia, and we land, and as again per usual, airlines like to screw with my head. And they arrange for planes to always arrive at the furthest gate from the middle of the airport possible. So we landed, and then I walked for 35 minutes. I think it's entirely possible that I didn't actually fly into Vancouver, that I flew to Seattle, and then I got on a plane, and the plane just went up in the air and circled around a couple times, and they landed back in Seattle. And then they're like, walk that way to Canada. Because that's what it felt like. But eventually, like half an hour later of walking down aisle after aisle after aisle in the airport in Vancouver, I got to, not exactly immigration, to the place where they're like, show me your papers so that you'll be allowed into Canada. Except when I got there, they had all those little stringy thingies so that they can make the lines so you can wind around like cattle. Except they don't kill you at the end, so that part's nice, right? But we got there, and they had closed off the end of the line. They'd just drawn that little fabric across it. And I got there, and I was like, hello? And then the nice Canadian lady there, who talked with the vague Canadian accent, which I'm not great at accents, but she's like, oh, hello. That's the Queen, really. But in my head, everyone in Canada kind of sounded like the Queen. Just a little. And I'm like, what do we do? And then I'm like, oh, great. I went to Canada, and it's closed. See, I got to Canada, and Canada was closed. And she's like, Canada's closed. And I'm like, really? And she's like, well, we just have to wait for someone to leave, because it's full. And I'm like, okay. And then like 10 minutes later, I guess someone left Canada, because she came out and she opened the line up, and we could go in. We had our little immigration form, and then we went through the line, and every once in a while I would do this little, right? Just because that's what I do. And the great thing was I got at the end of the line, and then like 20 minutes later, I was still almost at the end of the line, but I had moved forward a lot, which meant like they had let like 600 people into Canada, but only 10 more people were behind me. So apparently I got to Canada at the end of the immigration day. And and there were a couple stragglers behind me. They didn't have to wait. Canada wasn't closed for them. I watched like it was just me. It's like they'd been tipped off by someone. Someone who might have some reason to not want me in Canada. Okay, so we finally get to the front of the line and they ask us like the questions. And we, as you know, when I'm filling out forms, I am by and large truthful. So like the form says, are you bringing any fruits or vegetables into Canada? And everyone's like, of course not. And I'm like, well, technically we do have this weird vegetable that Loretta got from our CSA. We're bringing it into Canada. And he's like, what is it? And Loretta's like, it's purslane. He's like, I've never heard of that vegetable. And I'm thinking, you work in immigration. I mean, you'd figure over a couple years you'd have heard of every possible vegetable, which is why I think our CSA is actually like a secret government breeding ground where they are genetically engineering crops and then seeing if they kill people by giving them to me. Because I grew up in Wisconsin in farm country. I get vegetables every week I've never heard of. And I get squash that are larger than any squash has a right to be. There should be a maximum size on squash, and we have gotten squash much bigger than that, which I believe could only have been accomplished by genetic engineering and or radiation. And while, given the choice, if I'd known it was radiation, I would eat the squash, on the plausibility that it would give me superpowers. But since it's probably genetic engineering, I don't think genetically engineered squash are going to give me superpowers. So I do not eat the squash they give us. I let Loretta eat them, and then I keep an eye on her. So that if it appears she's developing superpowers, I would then begin to eat the squash. But look, man, I have gotten one item into my list of 5. Oh, quick, I got to talk about Harry Potter just because John said not to. Okay, so anyway, we went to Canada, and as you know, I'm terrible on vacation, mostly because I don't like leaving home. And people are like, Keith, don't you like to travel? I'm like, no, I do not like to travel. I have arranged for my house to be where I want to be, right? Everything I like is at my house, right? People are like, if there's something I can spend money on that would make me happier to be where I am, I buy it. So my house is the peak of happiness for me, right? Mathematically, I have arranged for there to be the further you get from where I live, you would assume the more miserable I would be. So I am terrible on vacation. First, I don't like going. And then when I get there, I don't know what to do. Because at my house, I always have stuff to do because I'm terribly busy. And so I have long lists. Whereas when I'm in Canada, there's nothing to do. It's a huge country full of very polite people with nothing for me to do. So we get to Canada, right? And as with, like, all my vacations, well, first of all my vacations involve TomTom because I have a little TomTom, and so when we get somewhere, we don't plan much before we go. So we will land and we will go, well, let's see what the TomTom says is nearby. And then we'll poke at it, and then we'll drive there, and then we'll go, this sucks. And then we'll find the next thing, right? So there was a lot of TomTom driving around for things. I booked myself into a nice Holiday Inn because I am Holiday Inn people. Like there were 2 days of this that they were kind of for business for this group I'm a member of. And for those, we were in this luxury hotel, this God knows how many stories, but this 20, 30-story downtown Vancouver, very tall, very glassy, $290 a night hotel room at a discount. I don't know what. I'm Holiday Inn people. I cannot in good faith pay $290 a night for a hotel room. I mean, I'd be like, well, first of all, I'm on vacation. I just paid $290 for this room. Why would I leave? I mean, I would just be wasting money, right? I mean, that's like $10 an hour, right? If I go out to dinner, I have wasted $10 of my hotel room. Just in the time I'm at dinner, $10 an hour is a lot of money for a very ordinary hotel room with a very ordinary bed and like, oh look, I can see the harbor. It looks like a harbor. I'm glad I spent all that money on this hotel. No. So I stayed, in a $150 a night hotel room with a jacuzzi. Because if I'm going to spend $150 a night, I'm going to get a big tub with bubbles where I can push the little button and it'll go, and I'll be like, this was really worth about $8. But I mean, I guess. And again, when I'm on vacation, I end up doing, again, I'm bored out of my mind because most of the things I got to do, I can't do. So I'm forced to do other things. We're in Vancouver, we're just driving around because why not? There's nothing else to do there. I watched CNN. There was this debt crisis in America that was happening that weekend. It's old news by the time you've heard of this, assuming America still exists. If not, hello, Chinese overlords. Or possibly Canadian overlords, because apparently the Canadians mostly have things together. Because I would turn the TV on, I would turn on CNN, and it would just be crazy shit happening. And then I'd turn on Canadian news, and they'd be like, oh yes, we're trying to make things better for people. And I'd be like, man, we should do that in our country. So I was saying all that. Anyway, so we went and watched a couple movies, because like I said, I got nothing to do. We saw 2 IMAX movies. We saw this IMAX movie about beavers. I know what you're thinking. IMAX movie about beavers, what's up with that? And apparently they have made all the IMAX movies they originally planned to make. And then, people have bought all the IMAX cameras and they're like, well, what else can we film in really, really high DPI that people will come watch? And then they made all those movies. And then they were like, well, we still got the cameras. What should we do? And then some guy's like, let's go tape beavers making a dam. And the second guy's like, really? And the first guy's like, yeah, it'll be a great movie. And that's when the second guy should have realized the first guy was drunk. Just ungodly drunk. But he didn't. So apparently, I read the credits, there were 8 cameramen. So apparently 8 cameramen went out and lived in the frozen northern Canadian whatevers for a whole year, taping beavers making a dam. And beavers apparently don't care if you're taping them. They're, right? It's IMAX. They try to keep the boom from getting in the shot and stuff, but you got to know there's a big camera and there's a beaver cutting down a tree. And after a while, the beaver's like, whatever. You could see every once in a while he'd look over at the camera, but most of the time they just go on. They're busy doing stuff. So there was the Beavers movie where the beavers were really cute when you see them close up, and they make the cutest little noises. They're squeaking all the darn time. So I'm surprised beavers aren't a domesticated pet. I agree there'd be problems with that. All your furniture would, of course, be flat on the ground because they would have chewed all the legs off. But other than that, and we went and saw that Harry Potter movie, that last Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter Part 8 or Part 7.2 or whatever, and I walked out, right? We got partway through the movie, and then Harry died, and I walked out. And I was like, I got to the door, and I turned around, and then I'm like, and then I looked back in, the whole movie was a dream. It's like there was Pamela Ewing, and there was Baba Ewing, and he got out of the shower. Apparently all 7 Harry Potter books were a freaking dream. Just bugged the shit out of me. I'm like, man, I thought this series was going somewhere up until the whole thing turned out to be a horrible dream. We saw that. We went and saw Captain America, for God's sakes. Because apparently by the last day, we were really ungodly bored. Well, Loretta wasn't bored. Loretta likes being on vacation. She's like, we can go see things. Or we can just sit around and not go see things. And I'm like, well, let's go watch a movie, I guess. So we were in Canada. First of all, Canada has holidays that we don't have down here, which surprised the heck out of me. We were there for a holiday called BC Day, which I was like, you have a holiday celebrating the pre-Christian calendar? Like, no, it's British Columbia Day. I'm like, if you're in British Columbia, isn't every day British Columbia Day? I'm like, no, this is... And then they explained it to me, and I wasn't paying attention because of the accent, right? It's just, it's hard to follow. They said a lot less than I expected, by which I mean only about every fifth sentence ended with A. But they're like, British Columbia Day, it celebrates the blah, 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 the founding blah, 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 British Columbia, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes. But we went and saw Captain America on BC Day, which I kind of thought was funny because Captain America, right? He's American, and we saw it on the national holiday for British Columbia. We went and saw fireworks when we were there too on a Saturday night. They had, this is in downtown Vancouver, right? And they apparently launched fireworks over the harbor. It's a big, huge thing. They were very proud that after the fireworks there were no riots. And it took me a while. They kept talking on the radio and the news about how, we got to be careful this time not to have riots. And I was thinking, like, you're Canadians. I'm not even sure if you know how to riot. And then, like, afterwards, they were like, oh, thank God there were no riots. And I remember walking around, there were like a million policemen in downtown Vancouver. I was like, man, do you have a lot of cops around here? I guess I'm going to have to cool it on the stuff that I do, which is totally lawful. And then later it occurred to me, Vancouver is that, they had that big riot after the hockey game there, like 3 or 4 months ago. That huge riot where that nice couple decided to lay down and kiss each other in between the two police lines. That's the only thing I remember from the riot. Apparently bad things happened, but I didn't remember. Anyway, so I was saying, so we're at this fireworks show, and it's a fireworks show. We're shooting fireworks up. We're playing music, and it took me a couple minutes to realize none of this was patriotic American music. I was like, I don't know if I can watch fireworks without hearing mostly patriotic music and the occasional country music screed, which I kind of grin and bear my ways. No, they played Chinese opera or something. It was all string music. It was like it had crescendos and stuff. But I'm like, this is wrong. I don't know why you people watch fireworks like this. Because if it's not the 1812 overture at the end, I don't know fireworks are over until I hear the 1812 overture. Just so you know. Okay, Captain America. I see. I got to get. Look, I'm gonna get through none of this. Anyway, we went and saw Captain America. It's this movie, blah blah blah, and I noticed it's World War II, blah blah blah. We got the scrawny little kid. We got a scientist who injects him with something, and then he becomes a really big, muscular guy, and then he dresses like Captain America, and then he goes and beats up Nazis. So pretty much, it's every comic book you've ever seen. Except this guy has a shield instead of magical powers. And he's fighting this guy called the Red Skull, who's played by Mr. Smith from The Matrix. And the guy who played Mr. Smith in The Matrix, great actor, right? Australian, he has ruined every movie he's been in after The Matrix. Because when I am watching the movie, I suddenly think, this movie's just another version of The Matrix, right? It's like Lord of the Rings, right? Great movie, 97 hours long, right? I mean, you could conceive a child and have the child born while you were watching Lord of the Rings, I think, if you got the director's track. But nonetheless, partway through Lord of the Rings, they get to the Elvish city, and there's the Elvish king, and I'm like, oh, frick! They're just in the Matrix. There's Mr. Smith, or there's Agent Smith. So Agent Smith plays the evil Nazi in this movie, and I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I mean, a good actor, but first of all, he doesn't have a good German accent. He has kind of an Australian accent trying to sound German. And secondly, like halfway through, he peels his head off, and instead of being Agent Smith, he's this creepy red-skinned guy. And I'm like, that made a lot of sense in the comic book, I bet. But in the movie, I would have thought, let's just keep the actor. Let's keep the good-looking actor who knows how to use his face and eyes and stuff instead of the creepy red-haired guy. It's always Nazis, too. I guess it's vaguely period-y. Oh, here, Captain America, right? The movie, It's titled The First Avenger because it's a whole series, right? The Captain America teams up with, these other people, and they form this crime-fighting team called the Avengers. And on the Avengers is Thor. Thor is a Norse god. Thor has been around forever. Like, technically, if there's a first Avenger, it's Thor. The 1,000-year-old god from across the Rainbow Bridge to Azeroth, or whatever the heck it was called. Asgard. I got the A right. I got the first A right. Okay? Not the scrawny little kid who got injected and made all puffy and muscular in the early 1940s. That's the second Avenger. Technically, he's the second Avenger. That didn't ruin the whole movie for me, but it did make me think briefly. What else can I talk? I've got like a minute left. Here, okay, so we got to Canada. Canada, we always eat more than we should when we're on vacation because, again, there's nothing to do. So it's like, well, let's go have food. Loretta, for the first time ever, had poutine in Canada, which is French fries with gravy and cheese. Truthfully, they're the best thing ever. They're heaven on earth, almost. And we didn't even, and I've had them before. I've had good poutine before. The stuff we had was only okay, and it was still better than almost all food. Look, I'm supposed to stop talking now, I guess. Look, I didn't get to talk about, well, I guess I did. What? Japadog. Oh, I'm supposed to talk about Japadog. There was also this hot dog place in downtown Vancouver, which we ate at, called Japadog. It's Japanese hot dogs. Although I don't think if you went to Japan, and if you went to Japan and went, I would like a Japadog, they would look at you like they don't know what you're talking about, which they probably don't because you're talking English and they don't. But they're like, we take hot dogs and we make them Japanese by putting stuff on them. I had one covered with cheese and meat and something else. It was delicious. I wouldn't have called it Japanese. I would have called it artery clogging because it in fact did. I didn't look up afterwards, but it's probably like a 4,000 calorie hot dog because hot dogs are basically just like rolled up bologna, which is pretty much like 90% fat, and then they covered it with 100% fat. So that just worked the fat average up. It was good. It was very good, but it was not good for me. And I forget what Loretta had. It was a hot dog with some Japanese shredded pork and something else on top. She liked it. I don't recall if I had a bite of it or not. That was the weird food. Let's see. We went and saw this aquarium in Stanley Park. I forget what it's called. It's the aquarium in Stanley Park. If you go to Canada, they'll know what you're talking about. John's telling me there's no more time, right? But I got credits. There's credits ruling, right? I can keep talking for a while. Here's the thing. First of all, it's an aquarium, so every time I go to an aquarium, I think dolphin cruise, right? Because there's dolphins in the aquarium who every morning those dolphins got to get up and think, wonder what I did wrong. Because I'm stuck here, whereas I could be out in the ocean having sex with other dolphins. With a wide variety of other dolphins, as opposed to the 3 other dolphins that I'm forced to have sex with every day here. Because that's what dolphins do. It's like 90% of their day is, I know it's a kid show.